The article begins today by saying war is a terrible thing that destroys nations and causes the death of people on both sides. Yes, this is what war is when, two countries, when their armies fight each other, a lot of people die, a lot of, buildings and infrastructure get destroyed. If something is destroyed, it means it is completely broken down so that it can no longer be used. It is just completely demolished, in other words. A bomb might hit it, or it might be shot up with bullets during war. It might get exploded, by a missile, some sort of weapon. A lot of things get destroyed during wartime, and it causes death of people on both sides. On both sides just means one side of the conflict or the fight and the other side, the sides that are fighting each other. So it could be different countries or just different groups of people.
Absolutely, yes. War brings death, destruction, much suffering to people, but it also brings great change to the world. I mean, after wars, after a big war especially, the world is never the same, and the people can change too, as it says. Yet, when countries fight, cultures mix and new traditions are born. Now you might think, well, soldiers aren't out there like sharing cake recipes as they're trying to kill each other, are they? No, of course they aren't. But some of the people who are around that war, maybe not actually fighting in it, but around it, or before, after the war ends, that's when these cultures can mix and new traditions can be born. A tradition is basically a established and agreed on way of doing things. Cultures, countries, peoples have traditions. When we think of giving a present or a cake with candles on top, that is a tradition in many countries. If you think of, the Christmas decorations and gift giving, or the red envelopes and the songs you might sing around Chinese New Year, these are traditions. They're part of a culture, and people do them generation after generation. It becomes a part of who we are.
So when there's war, people often have to move around.
Yes, they do.
They have to get away from the fighting. So
Absolutely.
That's perhaps when these cultures and traditions can mix. When people from one area, they have to run away from the fighting and they mix with people from other areas. And that's where we get these new ways of doing things or traditions. Now, in many instances, these battles have led to people inventing some special wartime foods. Instance here just means a specific time. So we're talking about instances of war. So when we have warfare or fighting, some sort of armed conflict, people invent some special wartime foods, just like we talked about at the beginning of the show. This is because they lack certain ingredients. They have to get creative with what they have on hand, which often isn't very much. We also see a very common phrase here, lead to somebody doing something. It means one thing causes something else. So we have a battle and we have less ingredients, people moving around, perhaps they can't carry a lot of foodstuffs with them, so that leads to them getting creative with all these things and making up some new dishes.
Very interesting. Let's look at one example here. It might surprise you. It says one of the most famous wartime foods is the croissant.
That's a wartime food?
It's a wartime food.
I had one yesterday.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, very common breakfast food. Most people think that it comes from France. It's the croissant, the croissant? Crescent roll?
I think you were right the first time.
Croissant, that's the sort of French way of saying it. Don't say croissant, then French people will just,
They'll
laugh
kick
at
you out of the restaurant.
That's right. They'll be snooty. But anyway, the croissant, which people think of as the traditional French breakfast bread, you could say, was actually, it says, created in Vienna, Austria. Not Australia. Austria, down near Germany and Switzerland over there, slightly more in the center of Europe, back a long time ago in 1683.
I always thought it was French.
Me too.
Just because of the name.
Yeah.
I assumed, and I was wrong.
Exactly, and actually the war that it came from didn't even involve French people.
So it has nothing to do with French people?
No, they just stole it.
It just has a French name that we use. Okay,
it's
well...
still delicious.
At that time, 1683,
yes,
Austria was at war with the Ottoman Turks.
The Ottoman Turks from Istanbul, from Central Asia.
So we're going back to the time
Eastern
of
Europe.
what we call the Ottoman Empire.
Yes, indeed.
The Turkish people were expanding. They were getting up as far as, Central Europe. They actually got quite far. They were at war with the Austrian people. To be at war with somebody means you are fighting a war with somebody. So two countries can be at war with each other. So this was Austria at war with the Ottoman Turks.
Interesting. And one evening during that war, some Austrian bakers heard the Turks digging a tunnel under the city. So this would be the city of Vienna in Austria. Some Austrian bakers, people whose job it is making bread and cakes and pies. They were busy working there, probably early in the morning, as bakers do, but they heard something maybe coming from under the floor, and that was the sound of the Ottomans, the Turks, who are the enemy outside the city, digging a tunnel, probably to go under the walls and make the walls fall down. Well, since it was very quiet, they heard them, and they decided, we should tell somebody, we should stop this surprise attack on our beloved city of Vienna. What did they do? They threw old bread at them. Ow!
They threw croissants at them.
Pies in the face.
And the Turks ran all the way back to Istanbul.
Yay!
No, not exactly. It says they informed the military.
Good idea.
So they could spring into action. Okay,
Yes.
they informed the military. Inform just means to tell somebody.
Hey!
The military
Down here.
is the army, the soldiers.
Yeah.
So of course, they're bakers. They say, well, we're not going to fight these people. Let's go tell the soldiers. They can fight them. They can spring into action. Spring into action just means you quickly begin to do something. You do something very fast. If you're in the military and somebody's invading, yes, you have to spring into action. If the enemy's,
I gotta go get my gun.
yeah, you can't do this.
But first, I gotta take a
Well,
bath.
I'm on my break, so just tell the
Maybe I'll
Ottoman
have a
Turks.
nap.
Tell the
Yeah.
Ottoman Turks just to take 5.
That's right.
We'll be with them in a minute.
Bitch.
No, you can't do that. You must spring into action.
Grab your gun and go.
That's our shortcut for you for today. So let's take a closer look at this phrase.
Charge!